How's it going, everybody? This is another kind of sky painting. This time it's going to be more tropical, and what we want to do is still work on that sky and kind of get those kind of softer clouds, but really dynamic. And let me show you what the picture is going to look like. This reference on the right hand side is from 123rf.com, and we're just using that under the educational license. And then the picture of the palm tree, the close-up, is from Wikipedia. So we want to just make sure that we give credit there. So we've got these nice little kind of wispy clouds, and it kind of fades from these reds down into the yellows. So that's what we're going to get at. So what I have here is there's really two sides to this paper, and it's really going to be helpful if you have the little bit rougher side up. It just accepts the water a little bit better than the smooth side. So it's going to be kind of hard to tell if you don't have it the right side. You know, you can just experiment. Maybe have two pieces of paper and try it and see which side you like better. Now, what I'm going to do is I like this. Our reference is pretty square, but in this, our paper is more rectangular. So I don't like to have anything really dead center. It's not as interesting. So like the center, putting the horizon line right here would be a little bit boring. So what we want to try to do is we want to divide it up in thirds. So here's 1/3, here's another third, and another third. So I'm going to make my horizon line down here, and I'm just going to do that with water. I again have my paper at about a 15-degree angle, so everything kind of just flows down. But let's look at the palette first again. We have phthalo blue, which is a kind of a little bit more greenish blue. It's, I guess, maybe a little more pure blue, you might say. A lighter blue. This is ultramarine blue. It's a little more purple. So you can just dab a little bit on a piece of paper and kind of check it out and see what color it is. I think it's pretty much in the right order on your palette, but it may have gotten switched. Then we have alizarin crimson. Alizarin crimson is a cool red. We have cadmium red, which is a little more orange. We have cadmium yellow, which is really kind of a dull color. I really don't like it. Some paint manufacturers make a really good cadmium yellow. This one seems to be a little bit dull and kind of almost greenish, but it's not. It's warmer. Then we have lemon yellow, which is definitely a cool yellow, which is pushed more toward the yellows and blues. Then we have yellow ochre, which is kind of a brownish yellow. Then here's the two colors that you're going to have to kind of maybe dab on something just to check out. One, especially on camera, is going to look like black, but it's actually burnt umber, and then the black is over here, and then we have sap green, which we're probably not using, so that's sap, S-A-P, green. So what I want to do is I want to wet my paper, but I don't want to drench it. That's why it's a little bit nicer to have yours taped down if you use masking tape or even the transparent like Scotch tape. It keeps it from warping a little bit. It's still going to warp some, but for our purposes it's going to be a little bit easier, but you don't have to do it. Now when I have this tilted, then the water just seems to flow, and it kind of puddles down here sometimes. But I'm going to get right at this because I want it to stay pretty wet. If I do kind of talk too much, or I have to walk away, answer the phone, whatever, I may have to wet that again a little bit so it's really soaking into the paper. Then I'm going to use a little bit of phthalo and a little bit of ultramarine to just a little bit of different kind of color. I really like cerulean blue, and if you really look at that light color there, that's kind of cerulean blue, but cerulean is usually a little more opaque. You can't see through it. These are pretty transparent, and you just have to kind of paint with them, and you'll learn what that means. But so what I want to do is I want to let this flow into each other a little bit, and I'm just going to kind of lay it in, figure out where this blue area is. I'm using the side of my brush. I want to have enough to not run out like I just kind of did there. And I'm just going to lay it in here. It really doesn't make a whole lot of difference, but you just want to have some areas where we can get this this red and this oranges. Now I got to kind of move kind of quickly here and get my blue out of here, because we have to also think about color theory. What happens when we mix yellow with blue? Well, we get green, and I don't really want a green sky. I want this nice kind of pinkish sky. So I'm going to use some red, this alizarin crimson, and a little cadmium red, mixing it. So we have this little pinkish, maybe even a little bit of purple. So we might just add a little bit of ultramarine blue, deepens it up, makes it a little more purple. I'm going to kind of leave these little spots, but I'm going to basically, I'm painting kind of horizontal. So if I have any streaks at all, they're going to be horizontal streaks. And then as I move down, I'm going to get a little more orange. So I'm going to take a little bit of this yellow. I like the lemon yellow, and the alizarin crimson makes it kind of this, I don't know, it's a little brighter orange. Now, you have to be careful now, because if you brought the blue down too far, then, or even into this purple, and then we start mixing yellow and purple are opposite of each other, and when you mix them, they turn gray. So we don't really want very gray kind of clouds here. I'm going to put a little bit of yellow on the bottom of these clouds, just because the sun is kind of reflecting up and hitting the bottom of it. But I want to do that all when it's pretty wet. Now I'm just going to pretty much let that go here. You can see it's a little bit too puddly for my taste here. I'm going to dry my brush off, and I know my paper towel is kind of off screen here, but I'm just going to have a dry brush and just kind of suck this extra water up, and then dry off my brush again. Go back over and dry off my brush. So if you got too much there, it shouldn't be this falling here, and shouldn't be this just massive puddle. It could be a little bit wet, but it shouldn't be too much. Now, if you notice in the center here, we've got the sun, and it's really just pretty much white. So what I want to do is, I think I'm going to add a little more purple, deeper purple here. If you're a rock fan, deep purple is pretty good for you. But I'm going to get a little bit more purple in here, and before it gets too dry, I'm going to kind of dab in just some clouds. I don't want to mix it. I don't want to go back and forth. You can see I'm just kind of dabbing it in and letting it just kind of bleed into each other, because I've got that yellow in here, and if I start mixing it, it's going to just turn gray. Now, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. I'll let it just kind of soak in and start to fall a little bit. That's the nice thing about having it up and down, is it just kind of starts to fall. The top gets soft up here, but then the bottom, which was looked kind of a little dotty and stuff, it kind of looked like a spider for a little bit. It went out, but now it's just kind of starting to fall, and it's not looking like it's a spider in all directions. So you can see that it's starting to puddle again here. I might dry off my brush, suck up a little bit more of that. Now, this is where you end up getting a drink of water or taking some time. I'm going to put the hair dryer here, so it goes a little faster for us. Because I really want, when I start to do this water here, I want this to be dry, because I don't want that yellow to kind of bleed down into my water. I'll go ahead and dry that pretty well. Now, you'll notice you have to kind of be careful. If there's a lot of water or a lot of paint on here, and a really strong blow dryer, you'll just blow the paint around it, and you don't want to do that. Okay. So now what we got to do is we're going to wet this bottom part, and I want to make sure that that's really dry. So I mean, if you don't have a hair dryer, then you're probably going to want to wait 15-20 minutes maybe. And I'm going to come down here and wet it pretty much like I did the sky, and it's really kind of a reverse of that sky here. So to some degree. I'm going to come in with this little blue. I probably should have cleaned that out a little bit. Maybe I can, not very much purple there. This blue kind of overpowers it. But so I'm going to come here and make sure that my horizon line is nice and flat. And you can kind of see how that just blends itself almost. It's just almost making it too easy. Now I'll take a little bit more red and get a little bit of purple. And I'm just going to kind of bring paint in from the sides, because you can kind of see that it has this highlight down through the middle. So if I want to touch into the blue a little bit, that's okay. And if we have a little bit of streakiness, that's not going to be a problem. See, if I do this fast enough, then that just automatically, it doesn't come in a real sharp line. It's still not a huge amount of water, but it's still definitely wet. If I look at it down from the bottom, it's still shiny. And then I'll just add a little bit of yellow in here, kind of flick out, because I still want that primarily to be white in the middle. Kind of drying off my brush and just flicking out. Maybe a little bit of pink down here at the very bottom. Okay, so gonna let that dry for a little bit. So let's. All right, now we've got some hills in the background here, and so we're gonna go pretty dark here with that, with a little ultramarine. A little alizarin crimson makes it, I think, a nice purple. So we've really got a kind of a blue, a warmer, more purplish red, and then a cooler red. If you want to try, put a little bit of cadmium in there. I think that makes it a little too red, so we'll pull a little bit more purple in there. And now you could take a little dab of black. Now you don't want it very much. I hate to use black hardly at all. But now I've got this way too purple, so I'm going to add a little more blue into it. So it's definitely more on the blue side than the purple side. And we can kind of put in some hills. Now you can see their hills are really soft. We could have maybe done that while the sky was still wet. I think we're just going to leave it, and we're going to kind of pull in some hills here that are pretty sharp. Now as I come in, I want to redefine that horizon line, so I want my brush to be pretty much straight up and down. And this is pretty thick paint here now, so I want this to be pretty opaque. I don't want it to be transparent. We're not watering it down. So if you get in a hurry and you end up doing this when it was too wet, then it's just going to kind of bleed all over the place. Now the nice thing about bleeding a little bit is, and maybe we could have probably left that a little bit wetter there, is that it kind of makes a natural reflection. So what we can do here, I want to make sure that I'm not stretching this paint out too much. I want it to be pretty opaque, so it's covering up the sky. And we can make some kind of irregular things. Just kind of push your paintbrush up there if you want it to be like maybe there's some trees off in the distance. You can make it smooth if you want to. But whatever there, that's kind of up to you. I'm going to kind of clean out my brush. It's not going to be completely clean. And then I'm just going to touch along the bottom here. And I'm just going to pull down side of the brush. Just give a little bit of, like it's a reflection. So it's going to be really the mirror. So this is a bigger hill, so it's going to come down farther. I'm going to give that just a little idea. Now my painting is a little darker in here. I think we get kind of a reflection. Maybe once it gets dry, it'll be a little bit better. So again, I'm going to take a little time here and dry that. Okay. Now, before we get too far along and we get our palm trees in here, I'm going to try, and this is going to be careful. You got to be really careful. A clean brush, just a very, very lightly damp. It's pretty dry. I got to make sure that it's clean. I'm still getting purple on my. I don't want to introduce any color. I want to just get a pretty dry brush. And we've got this little reflection in here. So I can take that kind of just fairly wet brush and I can just kind of lift out some of that paint. Now, it's going to start pretty small, and I don't want to mess with it too much, otherwise we're going to get something that's kind of blooming. But if you did it on the right side of the paper, and you take this paper towel and just barely get it wet and start to dab, and now my brush is starting to pick up too much blue. So it starts to just lift that paint back off. I don't want to leave that wet very long. Okay. And then up here where the sun is, I'll lift out a little bit of that. And that can be just kind of fuzzy there. It's just so overpoweringly white. I know this is going to be hard. I want to show you this though, so that you can practice on your own. You might have to go through 2 or 3 sheets of paper. This is probably going to be our last painting anyway, so you can mess up a little bit. The paper that I gave you. And it's all about controlling the amount of water, which is not an easy thing to do. Just have to figure out how much water you're putting on your brush. And my brush is pretty dry. Keep drying it like here. Keep drying it. I kind of dab and then I dry it off with my brush. I'm pulling the white off. Okay, so now let's go ahead and get these palm trees in here. So I'm going to take some black now. Might clean off my palette just a little bit with a wet paper towel. So we're going to get some black in here, and we don't want this to be too gray, so we're going to, hopefully that paint has been wet so that you can just dip in there and you're getting pretty full strength black. Mine, I probably could have let a little more damp, a little more water on it a little bit earlier. I'm going to take a little bit of this ultramarine and just blue that black up. Black really dulls things down. I hate to use that. I could use, and if you want to be a purist, and probably a lot of people that are watching this, they're saying don't use black at all. Maybe we should have used this burnt umber instead, which would probably have been a better idea. But we want this to be pretty thick, but pretty opaque. And then I'm just going to kind of push this in, and mine kind of comes down because remember this is a square and mine's are more rectangular. So I'm going to start up in here, and I'm just going to kind of push it so my paintbrush is laying down pretty far, and so that's what's going to produce these little weeds. And it can be kind of jaggedy and a little more of a dry brush, kind of like that scumbling that we did last time. So I want it to be pretty thick, so I don't want to water it down too much. If I do have to add a lot of water, then I gotta get some more paint. Because I want it to be thick enough to kind of cover up any of that color that I had in the water. I'm still just kind of pushing. And I could, if I want to, I can now hold my brush up nice and straight and kind of flick. Get some of those kind of weeds or something. I'm just flicking out. And that naturally gets thinner and thinner. So when I push down, I get a thick line. So here, if I do it right here, I get thick. Then I flick out and it gets thinner. Okay. Then get some more really thick paint here. And I'm always going to try to pull my brush. I don't want to push my brush when I'm trying to make a really thin line. So I'm going to pull. I got my light here in the way. And I'm going to just pull way up in here into the sky. This is only going to work if my paint is really thick. I don't want to run out halfway along the way. I'll make it a little bit thicker and then just kind of come back into that. So you know how thick or thin you want them, but these palm trees are not going to be super thick, and this one's going to be kind of leaning out over here. And just kind of flick up, and it automatically makes that thin line. So it's pretty neat what your brush will do if you haven't abused your brush. Get a little bit more water so it flows. And this just takes some time to figure out how wet it should be and how thick it should be. I'll come up, this one's going to be a little bit taller than the middle one. Okay, so this might even be up even taller. Yeah. This is the time to change it if you want to. We're really not too concerned about how it flicks up at the top, though. I can pull back down if I want to make sure that the tree trunk itself is, or the bottom is thicker than the top. There's no way that a tree can support something bigger up here than it is down here. All right, so now if we really look at this, switch again. Look at this palm tree. So we have these central lines kind of just drooping down. And it's really clean on top, and then the bottom is kind of got the palm fronds, so it doesn't come out equally out of the center. The top is pretty smooth, and then the bottom kind of flicks away. So that's what we'll try to do here. Probably on the screen it's kind of showing up pretty blue. I didn't mean to get that phthalo blue in there. Try to get that pretty black now. And so we do have a few up here that are kind of high, so we're just going to, it's kind of skipping, a little scumbling, kind of like from last week. We don't want that. There's one branch. There's another branch. Now, it's kind of falling this way, so then all these other palm fronds are falling down. Gravity's kind of pulling it down. Now this one's sticking up pretty straight, so it might come from all different directions. So I'm not pressing very hard to get in that thin line. That's probably only one of the very few that is going to come out both directions. So another one will just flick out here. And then all the fronds start falling down. So these are shorter. As it comes back toward the trunk, it gets longer and longer and longer. So we'll throw another one out here. And some more in here. So when it starts to skip, you need a little more water. And now this one's kind of falling so much that now we're going to see palm fronds on both sides. Yeah, probably the same thing is true here. Put one more in there. Maybe we'll put one more up here. Now we kind of got messy, so I can just make it a little bit bigger. Okay. And mine's kind of reflective, so it looks a little bit lighter than what it really is. Let's try another one here. Kind of flick out, and then now they're kind of angled back toward tree trunk, kind of like little arrows, I guess. That one's kind of ugly, but we'll put some more in there. I'm not going to be able to see it too much. I'll pull down here, and now all these are falling down. The gravity's taking over. Another one in here. Put one up here. Actually, I think I misspoke. I didn't. I think I said they're like arrows. They're really backward arrows. They're kind of arrows pointing back toward the central hub there. So in here it just gets dark and you can't really see it. Make that one a little bit longer. That's a great thing about it. You can just lengthen it. Yeah. Okay. And we'll do one more. Come up here nice and tall. This is never going to work if your sky is still wet. You will have one big ugly mess. If they overlap, that's okay, especially if you have pretty much pure black, then you really won't know which one's on top of the other one. And it'll just look more natural. You can put some shorter ones in here. Sometimes right at the base it's a little bit bigger. There's coconuts if it's a coconut bearing. All palm trees don't make coconuts, so. And there we go. So let's dry that so You can see the color a little bit better. Alright, and then if you want to, you can put that little bird up there that's kind of enlivens things a little bit. Just put a couple there that makes it look a little more alive. Okay, so it's going to be all about controlling the amount of water. So see what you can do, and hopefully you'll have a good little bit of fun. So, all right, thanks for watching. Oh, let's take this off now. I always think that's fun and kind of satisfying to show that white side. Just kind of cleans it up. Remember, always pulling away from the painting. And there we are.